right, good morning. I'm Erin Connor. I'm the owner of Telos Educational Services, and I'm just going to tell you a story this morning. So, I grew up in a small rural town in western Pennsylvania. My family owns an asphalt maintenance company. So we all grew up learning how to spray driveways, seal driveways, and line stripe parking lots. And strangely enough, the smell of coal tar is sort of comforting to me. I know, it's very sad. But I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. It was a very modest farm. I grew up taking care of horses and building fences by hand. And I went to a high school with 100 students in my class, and only 10% of us went on to post-secondary education. So I'm a first generation student. And when I got to college, two things happened to me. The first is I fell in love with learning. Perhaps it was because I already loved reading the dictionary for fun. But it was so exciting to me to encounter new ideas and diversity. And I quickly realized that knowledge is power. And the second thing that happened to me is I fell in love with social justice, the idea of leveling the playing field for all people so that they could access what they need to be successful and happy and healthy and productive in life. So of course, my go-to was I have no other option. I must become a lawyer with a very fancy briefcase and move to DC and march up and down the steps of the Capitol building and the Supreme Court. And then I graduated from undergrad and quickly realized that law school was not for me, and that sadly I would not be able to argue constitutional law right out of law school. So I was stuck, as I think many students and people are, with this love and passion for something but no specific direction. I found a job as a caseworker for delinquent and dependent youth, and I worked with them in their group home. And I worked with them in their alternative school that was essentially made of plywood walls. And I sat in their classroom day in and day out and watched how education offered them nothing. They were troubled, and education was the answer, but yet something strange was happening where the teacher's teaching subject-verb agreement and the kids don't care. It was like a luxury to learn that because they didn't see how it was going to help them. Harold Bloom once said, "Education offers nothing to a troubled man." And it always bothered me because education was the thing that fixed my troubles. And I couldn't live with that reality or that truth that I saw there. So I applied to grad school, to the best school in the nation. On a wing and a prayer, I got in, and I paid out-of-state tuition. But I graduated with a master's in curriculum and instruction and learned from some of the greatest teachers that our nation has. And I went off with all the passion and fury in the world into the educational field. I started in a private environment. It was a learning institute, and I watched neuroscientists come in, do testing on kids. I looked at MRIs of the brain and had people connect for me how your brain works with how you learn. I then moved into I went to an international baccalaureate school and watched students become so empowered and so in love with learning to go out and change the world. And then I moved to Pennsylvania. And y'all, I saw some version again, and it's not that this isn't happening across the nation, it's just in the two previous experiences, I didn't see what I saw here. And I worked in two different school districts, and I guess the cumulative years, 14 years in education. And the problem that I saw, the problem that my company addresses, is that our students are falling through the cracks. They're not fulfilling their potential. Their emotional, their psychological, their motivational needs are not being met. And I would say especially for the students who have some kind of learning struggle. And I would argue, I mean, there's 6 million diagnoses of ADD, ADHD in our nation. I would say because that's the one we're sort of willing to talk about, but there's trouble with processing speeds, there's trouble with executive functioning skills. We've got a plethora of issues that our students, at least locally, I feel are being stigmatized. Even the ones that don't have the learning struggles, diagnosed learning struggles, just regular students are struggling. And so what I see is fear. I see fear and anxiety in our youth. And so I created a company to offer educational services through tutoring classes and test prep to address those fears. Because what I want to do is take fear, turn it into hope, and take that hope and turn it into higher test scores or higher confidence or whatever they need to walk through the next door to be successful and fulfill their potential.
How do you make money doing it?
I am. Well, I didn't take any, my risk in starting up was I withdrew my retirement from working in Pennsylvania. And so I just I don't have a loan, I don't have anything. I took that money, I talked to my husband, this was my big fancy consultation. I should have went to Denny at my mount, and I was like, all right, you know me better than anyone, can I do this? And he said, if I had $1 million to invest and could invest it in anything, I'd invest it in you. So I did it, and that's, I think, a good start. And then I did it just me. I didn't take on a whole big team of people because I didn't know how I was gonna feed and take care of the people. So I started with me. And then as we grew, the company grew. And I think our doors have only been open for 2 years. I think what's maybe most valuable is I'm willing to, at the end of the year, I reflect and say, we had no interest in, you know what class I really wanted? Critical thinking. I just wanted to teach a critical thinking class. I wanted all the students from all the school districts to come in and sign up to take a critical thinking class with me, and guess what? No one did. And I had to drop that. I had to say, okay, I'm not offering critical thinking courses anymore because we're not getting any enrollment. But what we are getting enrollment in is life coaching. These kids need help with the skills, not just the content. And we see a big need in SAT, ACT prep, because that standardized test score carries a lot of fear and weight in our world. Yes, sir.
Sort of two interrelated questions. One
Sure.
was, is there any money in creating curriculum? And the follow-up was, what are your opportunities to scale up your business without increasing your marginal cost?
I think I've not looked into, it's not been on my, it's not like necessarily my 5-year plan, the selling of a curriculum, but what I do, so I don't know how much money it's in that, but I do
Maybe
want,
zero, right?
yeah, very well maybe. But what I do want to do, and I do know that there's a huge potential for, is I want to turn my SAT course into an online SAT course. And there's 2 million students taking the SAT a year. And I've looked, I'm very competitive, and I've looked at what the 3 biggest competitors in the nation are, and the hours of instruction that you have to go through, it's like 40 to 80 hours for the online courses that are big time. I think I feel very confident that I could produce the same results, which is 100 to 200 test increase in 20 hours. So I'm excited in the next year to look into how to create that. And I'll need help because technology isn't my...
As a parent, I get very excited about when you talk about 100 to 200 points increase. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it would have made a big difference for me if we didn't even have guidance counselors in the school I went to. If I could have gotten just a little bit higher of an SAT score, I think it would have opened up a different type of school for me, not just state schools, and I think it could have potentially, changed some things. And so I just hope to give people the resources they need to fulfill their potential. So I don't care what school they go to, I just want them to get the best score they can.
So what kind of technology would you need?
Well, all I need to do is figure out how to create online lessons. So got a video, do the video instruction, and then regardless of, the platform, the browser, the whatever, it's gotta work. We can't, and so then I'm gonna need tech support and stuff like that, and this is a whole new world to me.
So it seems to me that if you want to shave number of hours
Yes.
in the curriculum, you need to kind of have some triage of what the kids actually need.
Yes.
So there is a potential of using technology to point you to the right direction where actually they need
Yes.
most help.
So step one would be a diagnostic.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And that technology can, they can go online and fill something or take some kind of short test that's prepared by you, which would then point to where exactly do they need. Is it a text-taking skill or is it a subject matter skill? Or in which area if there is. So.
Do you talk to students about get off your cell phone so much? Like I wonder if part of the problem right now is just like with the anxiety is they're constantly on their phones like 24/7.
They are. I think, and Kevin, obviously, the technology. It's. I don't think it's going anywhere. So, I see it as that sort of always being on their phone as a coping skill, and so it's how they're dealing. It's their escape from the things that are stressing them out. And I think adults do it too. We get on social media when we don't feel like thinking anymore because we need a break from the pressures of life. And so I try to speak into coping skills, really. If I see a kid who can't put a phone down, let's talk about why you're using that. And metacognition, self-reflection, you start building those skills, they're going to start realizing if they can diagnose their own problems, then that's half of the battle. Okay, I'm on my cell phone too much. They have to choose. There is a point and an age where they have to choose to put it down and do what they want to do. So you have to motivate them to make that choice. That's a challenge.
I think related to that is, so when you get students to come in the door,
Yes.
are you finding that the relationship with the parents is different than the kids that you're trying to approach, kids who don't walk in the door?
Right.
I just wonder if there's a relationship with the parents that's different, and do you see that as where you have to build that relationship before your kids do come in the door?
That's a great question. And it makes me think of when I was in Montana and the whole front of the building was glass. So I could see when parents dropped their kids off. And it was one of my first clients. I don't like to call my students clients, it just feels weird. Okay, so drops them off and I can see them arguing in the car. She's like, get out of the car, you're coming in. And he gets out and slams the car door. I mean, he was not happy about coming to tutoring. And in this area, the notion sort of is, when I was in DC, it was everybody had a tutor. It was the thing. So then we come here and I'm I'm thinking about starting a tutoring company. And people are oh yeah, I threaten my kids with the tutor if they don't get good grades. And I'm I'm opening a punishment company, so he came in with his arms folded and he was miserable. And then he became, I had to earn his trust and show him that he's not coming because he did something wrong. He's coming because his parents love him and want him to get help. And so the truth is, the kids that I'm seeing already have some resources that the kids I'm not seeing, that ones that I'm not seeing, they don't have parents who are forcing them to come. And so I will always have that heart for that population of kid and need ways and ideas about how to reach them. Through grant writing or whatever, I don't know.
You have that stigma too, that,
right.
I'm from K-12, so I know, right? You get to the schools as well to say, look, we need to change the mentality.
Right.
If kids need tutoring, they're not branded as being lesser, right. Weaker, etc.
Right.
Are you doing anything along that lines with communication to the K-12s?
No, but that's a good idea. Yeah, the mindset around this. Really, yes. I teach every student that comes in for life coaching, one of our whole sessions is built around the notion that your behavior is dictated by your thoughts. So we have to start thinking about what you're thinking. And they're no, I want to change my behavior. I'm no, we have to change your thoughts. I don't know what I think about that. Okay, well, let's explore that. But thinking about that systematically, within the schools, or bridging it would be really interesting. Yes?
Two things. Have you surveyed your market, all the schools, like, I mean, have they identified that, you know, we have a large population that the primary need is basic reading? Or is there a population for math? With that information, then the second level, you could create it, go to a more positive thought where it could be you're creating gaming cohorts
Mhm.
for math
Mhm.
for certain grade levels, so it takes away the stigma of tutoring.
Right.
And then you could also, with that, offer, you know, scholarships or whatever.
Thank you.
So it seems like you're a salesman, not just a salesperson,
Mhm.
I guess, not just a educator.
Right.
You gotta sell the concept. And it seems like a good idea would be to have some kind of screening software or online app that would be distributed to the schools to actually promote service as not necessarily punishment, as you said,
Right.
but as a worthwhile endeavor with certain goals. You're gonna go to better schools,
Right.
things open up for you. And to maybe do screen them and say, well, if you run this app, we'll tell you that you need special instructions in physics, math, social science, history, whatever, so that would help pre-screen, or triage
Right.
at the remote location, and then perhaps hook your service as the, not necessarily, you can go anywhere else, but, I do those services right away.
Yeah, how
I
much
like
of that is, how much of the opportunity do you feel like is like based on the proactive notion of like, let's get ahead of this, or kids like panicking because they got a D in whatever class, like, and they need some help before the next final or whatever?
Yeah, I wish it was proactive.
Yeah.
I would love to see that trend change, and maybe just being a service that's offered, people will realize, hey, that exists, and I can proactively seek it out. But for the most part, I think it's reactive. I mean, we have, our life coaching is either with high school or college students, and so our high school students, the life coaching piece, so tutoring would be content, right? You come in with a chemistry textbook, we'll teach you about molecules, that's tutoring. But life coaching is, there's the set of skills to succeed in that chemistry class that you need, and to succeed, and then we can integrate, okay, where are you at in your stage of life? Do you need help choosing colleges? Do you need help preparing to take the SAT? Do you need help making a timeline of what you need to do? So, we sort of work with all of that, and for the most part, I see way too many seniors in the SAT course or asking for help with college prep, because then it's just so overwhelming and there's so much anxiety. Or we see a lot of students, and we're happy to help students who aren't doing well in a class, because we can help turn that around. But it would be, I think, fantastic to get students who are going to Bucknell who know they had a lot of accommodations or supports in high school, and then they're coming in their freshman year, and we could say, come meet with us 2 times a week, your first semester, so that we can help you stay on track, as opposed to what we have, which is my son or daughter almost failed out the first semester. We're thinking about transferring schools. If they can't, he or she can't get their grades up, can you help? Which we're happy to do, but it would be great if it were more proactive. Yes.
I'm just going to throw out a crazy idea.
Yeah.
Because this is great, like what you're doing is awesome, and it's got me thinking a lot. Specifically about like the idea that the kids that need you the most aren't going to be pushed to come to you by their parents. And you mentioned scholarships. Yeah, I was wondering if you, or anybody else maybe, has done kind of the Tom Shoe, Warby Glasses kind of model. Because it's kind of interesting to me as a parent in that, like, I would be willing to pay more for my own son's tutoring, and the idea that it also could give tutoring to somebody who can't afford it. And it'd just be a pretty cool, like, because I think scholarships is hard, and I don't think you want to go sit around and write grants, but like, as a parent, I would do that. I definitely
that's a
would,
great idea.
because there is a reasonable amount of guilt that, like, I'm pushing, like, when I send my own kid to a tutor, it's like, he has advantages and opportunities that this other kid doesn't, but I would pay more for
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
The other thing is almost every school district now has a foundation. educational foundations, which could be a resource for, for students who the school identifies that would be receptive to that kind of participation, whether it is direct tutoring or some kind of enrichment or whatever, and they could provide, again, those extra dollars, so. And I also don't think you should give it for free.
Yeah.
Do you know what I think is really interesting?
Some
Is like
element.
how you could be an interface with the local schools of like, all right, here's the problems that these college kids are having.
Right.
Here's where the really weak areas are, obviously, because they're doing so terribly in such and
Right.
such subject area. Like, have you seen stuff like that?
Well, I mean, no, I guess I haven't really explored that. I feel like the problem is so systemic in the school districts that I offered, when I first started, one of my tabs on my website was like workshops. And I sent my workshop topics to every school in the area, private, public, saying, like, let me come teach you these 3 strategies for, helping empower students who have whatever struggle, whether it was reading or whatever. So, and there wasn't a response, and I feel like even if I did a workshop for the teachers, I don't know, is that just pessimistic of me? I'm like, I still can't fix the systemic problem. Like, I don't know if any of you have children or know how the system works, but if you have a learning struggle, which we're talking about, the last data that was collected, it was in 2001, and it was 10 to 30% of our schools, public schools, had identified kids with IEPs or 504s. Well, I'm sure that 30 is probably the low end of it now. So the accommodations that a lot of schools give those students to help them be successful in high school just drop off when they graduate. And they're not necessarily empowering, they're not empowering, they're dependent, they make the student become dependent on that source instead of independent so that they can figure it out on their own. So I would have to, like, in my mind, it seems so daunting, like I have to overhaul the whole
just on an informal
But
note, though,
yeah.
as you move more and more
Yeah.
to higher ed,
Yeah.
you could be like, hey, these 5 local districts, here's what we're actually seeing. Like, English is great. You guys are doing great in English.
Right.
We don't hardly get any problems with that.
Right.
Like for calc or whatever.
Right.
Here's what we're noticing with the college kids. Because I don't know if local school districts actually do that
Right.
that sort of follow up, like
Right.
with their students.
Right. Yes.
A very quick 2-part question. So
Sure.
if you were to break it down, life coaching versus, I guess, the other
Mhm.
services that you offer, tutoring, et cetera,
Yes.
what percentage is life coaching?
Mm.
Because personally, that's where I feel there's a very big need.
I do too, and I would say it's probably 30 or 40%, and tutoring is the other.
Is a life coaching.
Mhm.
So in my experience, teaching a little bit in higher ed was that I've taught some DISC and some Myers-Briggs.
Yes.
So they have very little experience with that. So when you break that out and you teach them a little bit about themselves and how to, cope with other learning styles, other personality styles, workplace, they find that really beneficial. Unfortunately, it's usually, for me, it's at the senior level. I think if they can get a little bit of that earlier on, it can help guide them through the higher ed process. So,
Thank you.
eventually, 4 years later, they're going to get a job that might not fit their style very well. They go home, they're exhausted, they have a wife, they have kids. We know all those things that happen.
Right.
Let's get them in positions where they can succeed based on something that fits their style a little better.
Yes. Yes.
Kudos for what you're doing.
Thank
and
you.
Congratulations.
Thank
2 years in, what has been your biggest success story, and what are you doing with that story?
Good question. I don't think I'm doing enough with that story. And I'm a storyteller. It's what I love to do, but I don't have a testimony link on my webpage, which thank you for asking that question. I would say my biggest success story, every kid that comes through the door is my biggest success story. To see, and for one student, the boy who came in, slammed the car door, folded arms. He started looking forward to coming. He used to go to Perkins before he came, once he started driving, and then he would bring me like dessert from Perkins. It was like we were just hanging out, and it wasn't this awful thing. But I would say there's a student at Bucknell who, when I'm going to go to the graduation, and I'm gonna cry when he graduates, because so smart, so talented, but just struggled his freshman year so much and really lost all confidence that he had anything to contribute. And I feel like I took him on as a son. He's been to my house plenty of times. You know, you develop relationships with the people and his parents, and when they come for Parents Week and come and give me a hug, I feel like I am his coach. I feel like I'm his coach, and that for whatever reason, I was the person or we provided the services that he needed at just the right time so that he can go on. And he's gonna run a company someday, and it's gonna be phenomenal. But he had to get through that, that transition.
So how can he be an ambassador for you?
True. That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah.
Sometimes it's said that, teaching is like playing the piano, assuming you have the passion, that everyone can learn to play, but really good teachers who, while they're teaching their subject matter, are also doing life skills, life coaching, is like a concert pianist. So you have all this personal success. How are you screening and hiring and overseeing your personnel so that what you've experienced and the success you're having is then replicated or scaled?
It's challenging. I think there's certain attributes I look for in the hiring process. I ask people why they became teachers or why they want to teach. And if they say anything about content in the answer, I love my content. I love math. I love novels. That's not for us. And that's a beautiful thing, but that's not what we're doing. We love people first. So you have to love the kid, which means it might be a difficult process. But if you love the kid, if you love, I guess essentially, if they say something along the lines of the content is the means to get into the kid's life, then that might be someone that, and of course a certain educational background and certain skill sets. But what I would love to do is systematize what we do and have a handbook and a curriculum and intensive training sessions where these tutors are the concert pianists. They are integrating the life skills, even if they just come for tutoring. I mean, that's my vision, is even if you just come for content stuff, there are ways that you can speak skills into that. And I would love to see that systematically happen.
Erin, we have to ask the last question, is
Sure.
what can we do for you?
I think just, as we talked about, the culture in this area is one of just that if you need extra support, that's inherently bad, and it just isn't. And so really, if you just encounter a young person, whether it's your child or somebody else's child, we all need support to fulfill our potential. For some of us it's academic, for some of us it's skill sets, but just to sort of break that stigma in your own sphere of influence. And then secondly, to let people know, I've lived in this area for I guess this is our 8th year, and I still feel like the new person. Like there's this body of knowledge that other people know who have lived here their whole life that I don't know about. So sharing what we do with people who you think might benefit from our services would be appreciated.